Hi, my beautiful friends. I hope you guys are doing good today. So, welcome back to Poker Mind Expansion, episode 8. I think it's important to talk about sort of the reactions that we will end up probably getting if we discuss this kind of stuff with other poker players around us. Um, in addition to that, just discussing kind of the way that we are socialized and the emotional reactions that different people may have in our community if we actually start going deep into ourselves and we actually see that, holy cow, all of this knowledge ultimately was an illusion. To know something directly is not possible, but to know about it is absolutely possible. The mind is quadrillions of miles beyond what I currently knew because I always thought that I was perceiving the world. But of course, this is just the way that the Homo sapien mind perceives reality. The brain only makes up about 3% of the body weight, yet it uses about 25% of the resources. So the brain tries to make things very, very efficient. And this is extremely costly relative to other animals. Most other animals' brain weights are not more than about 5-10% of their body weight. So the majority of our resources are going to our cognitive abilities. And the way that we perceive reality reflects this because we see the meaning. We know the meaning of a car. We see a car. We already have a model of the meaning of a car. We understand that this vehicle can go to A to B. It can help us in all these different tasks that we have in our life, etc. We don't need to walk up to a car and every single time try to understand the meaning of the car. We understand it, but we don't consciously think this is a car every single time I step in. It can do XYZ. However, not a beginner, not a child, but say a beginner driver is a good example. Sure, they will know what a car is in terms of the description that they could give to someone else, or they know what a car is in the sense that they realize that it can drive from here to there. I'm not talking about knowing it in terms of its in the mechanics or anything like that, right? But the beginning driver will have a relatively difficult time actually going and driving this vehicle. In fact, they will have to use a lot of brain power to think about the millions of scenarios, the millions of possibilities that are going on. Driving is very complex. Driving is very dangerous. There are quadrillions of possibilities, millions of things going on. It's very dangerous. In fact, sitting in our home is basically not dangerous. We're probably not going to die, depending on our age, depending on our health, etc. We're probably okay. But once we step on the road, the odds increase by thousands compared to just sitting in our home. Depending on our age, depending on different things. But yes, stick with me, right? Like it gets very dangerous. There are a lot of variables, but someone who has done this for a long time starts to be able to do it without having to think about it consciously. Consciousness is simply about coming back to our natural state. It is simply about getting in touch with the knowledge that we already have. And realizing that it's not the object that is giving us this knowledge, it is the meaning which we project onto the object. Once we understand that, we start to understand ourselves much better. Things become less confusing about what our opposition is doing. I think that seeding our consciousness through simply listening and meditating, listening to these kind of things, not necessarily this on poker. I think that there are probably more efficient videos for self-realization than necessarily the poker ones. I'm specifically talking about poker because I want it to be available to poker players. But if one's goal is actually mind expansion, which is the only thing that matters even a little bit, nothing even comes close times a quadrillion. Because the entire framework of everything that we know is in this unexpanded mind. But of course, this is a very, very painful idea to the ego. But we can certainly see that a lot of people think about things very one-dimensionally. I see someone with a certain haircut and I have lots of associations about their personality. I've never met them, I've never talked to them, I don't know anything about them, but I automatically have a category I put them into. It's not my fault. It's not moral. It's not immoral. It simply is a fact about the way that the mind works. Now, of course, if we express this to people, they may be offended. They may get their feelings hurt. They may say some words. And then if I'm very unconscious, then I may have a reaction within myself, etc. But it's important to realize that people are not always going to be kind if we start to discuss these ideas, because it goes against their entire identity as far as GTO is the greatest way, or whatever trick they found, whatever their current belief system is. If we start discussing this stuff with people, it will go against them very much. And it's important to be aware that some of these topics are going to be difficult to be able to discuss with people. In fact, I don't discuss it with anybody in my personal life except for one friend who I know, and he's got like 150 IQ. He's a musician, he's a philosopher. I'm happy to discuss it with him. I'm also happy to discuss ideas with teachers and stuff that I have, teachers of mine, because I'm not very deeply realized, and I don't understand myself particularly well. So it's very nice to have teachers. But in general, I don't discuss these ideas with other people, as well as my girlfriend also has had self-realization, which is very good for her. But she and I don't even talk, actually. We simply just occupy the same house. Not because of the beliefs, it's just there's nothing really to talk about. Just like my cat doesn't really talk. We just lay together and hang out and meow at each other. But it's very expected to have resistance if we ever bring up these conversations. In fact, if someone was very loving and respectful toward these ideas, if we talk about them with others, if we, at some level, if we make the realization that our experience is much deeper than we are currently seeing it, and we know that there's something more, and not something in a future heaven, I'm talking about right now, reality could be more than what it is in my body, in my life, not some futuristic 10 million years in the future, 20 million lives away, whatever. I'm talking about this body can have it, it's just simply because the mind is not connected, the brain is not hyper-connected like a child. And it's very possible. Now, this is not an opinion. We're talking about brain scans that have been done scientifically on people that have meditated and their brains have become much more connected and they're much more quantumous with life. We have to go beyond belief. We have to start going to science. Because science is simply facts about objective reality and the ways that we predict how things will interact. Very utilitarian. Going based off of belief simply means that we've collected some ideas and then we continue to believe them. For instance, a child in a Christian family, born into a Christian family, believes that I'm only going to get a Christian woman. In fact, maybe he finds a very kind woman who has a lot of empathy, and she has a beautiful heart, and she's a great listener, and maybe even she likes to play some music. She's a lovely woman. But she's of another religion. So this a priori idea, if I cannot be with this person because of XYZ, it is not reality, because there's just a person in front of us. They don't have an identity. If we assign them an identity, if we say this is a black person, this is a green person, this is a purple person, this is a yellow person, this is a white person, none of these things exist, obviously. Obviously, you cannot directly know this person is black. You can simply use your eyes, and you're not seeing the color of their skin. Your brain is projecting an image inside of you. Your consciousness is inside of you. It's not projected, it's not inside of another person. And first of all, in order to even see someone's skin color and then know what race they are, you would need knowledge as to the meaning of this color relative to other things. For instance, someone will identify as a man or a woman. I'm not saying biology is incorrect. Certainly we have men and women in terms of their genitalia. But as far as the way that they behave, mostly it's just socially constructed. Just social constructs, social conditionings. Men, don't cry, you're very bad. But also, don't be invulnerable. You need to be a little bit vulnerable. But if you're too vulnerable, you're going to make us uncomfortable. And women, don't get mad, be nurturing, be nice, don't make us uncomfortable. We want to dominate you and we want to feel masculine. It's all the same kind of shit. It doesn't actually matter. Any kind of preconceived idea as to how you are supposed to behave is absolutely disgusting and against your freedom. But the majority of people believe that these ideas, something hurts their feelings or something they don't like, so they say, I'm not going to do this is not the kind of person I am. But this identity is obviously off the backs of other people. that they look at. They have to look around for other people that are not doing a good job, and they say, this is a bad person, and I am a good person. Of course, this is not something that they're necessarily going to say, or there are some people that actually talk badly about other people as well. The people, they spend their energy saying negative things about other people. Now, why would this happen? I mean, it doesn't matter. It's perfectly fine. But, like, I mean, who gives a fuck? You're just, like, you're just using your air into the air, and you're making vibrations and whatever. But the logic or the rationale behind this is trying to advance the self-image and make other people inferior, so I will appear as superior. It doesn't matter if you appear superior or inferior to who. You don't even know that someone will believe you are inferior or superior. You can only imagine. A lot of people smile to your face and they might talk shit behind your back. In fact, someone might even be angry to you, but in reality they're just terrified of you and they don't really understand themselves, so they're just screaming. We don't necessarily see what we see. So it's very expected if people get defensive. People have gone very far away from themselves for thousands of years. The distance between the man who decides to look at himself and try to understand himself and the man that simply exists in the world has almost become unbridgeable. When I say exists in the world, I'm talking about a slave of society. I'm talking about someone that basically believes everything that they're told and then they just parrot everything that they're told. They just repeat random ideas that they hear. But they don't actually investigate for themselves because it's too painful. They're very, very, very far away from their own reality. And they've also forgotten the way back home. And they forgot the purpose of what their being actually is and why we're here. There's a very beautiful parable. I'm going to try to remember it. Basically, there was a king who wanted his son to be his successor. He only had one son, and he was a very wise king. The old man chose a very strange strategy to make sure that his son would be a very good king and rule over the people. He's got millions of people that he needs to help, and he needs to make sure that they have enough food, they have enough water, no one's going to start war. This is a very important position. So he made an interesting decision that the court was absolutely shocked by and appalled by. They were gossiping and saying how inhumane, cruel this terrible king is. They said terrible things about him because his son was quite young. And the decision that the king made was he sent his son away from the kingdom. And he told the son, I'm abandoning you. He's not telling him, I want you to be the king in the future. He says, I'm abandoning you. You should completely forget that you were ever the prince. You are no longer the prince. And you are no longer going to be my successor. You are now an orphan. Now, the king did not exactly explain why. He was a teenager at this point, but he wanted to make this son understand something very important. He took all of his beautiful clothes, ornaments, everything. And he was only given the clothes of a beggar. And he was taken away in the middle of the night in a chariot. He wasn't even given a real explanation. He was simply thrown out of the kingdom. And there were very strict orders that he should not be allowed back in the kingdom from anywhere. Years had passed. Years. And the prince actually became a real beggar to the point that he forgot that he was ever even a prince because his day-to-day life was simply trying to get enough bread to survive. He was begging for his clothes. He was begging for food, for shelter, to get out of the rain. And he had slowly accepted the situation that he was in. After many, many years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, one day sitting outside of a place where people could come, it would be a modern day hotel, that would be the word, or a hostel. He asked for money. It was very hot, and he wanted enough money to get some shoes, secondhand, of course, because he wouldn't be able to afford good shoes, because the ground was almost like fire. He was in a very, very hot environment. His feet were completely cracked, completely burned. They did not have medicine like back then. It was becoming absolutely impossible. He had wounds all over his feet. He was crying out just for a few coins because he was in tremendous pain. Now imagine people around him saw him, beggar, fuck this guy, I don't want to help him, da 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 da. They did not want to help very much. It depends on the culture that you're around. If you're in a culture that actually loves human beings, of course they're going to help the weakest members of society. Albert Einstein said something like, I don't quite remember, but he said something like, the society is represented, their humanity is represented by how well they treat the weakest members. So if we're living in a society where people are saying these people deserve whatever, da 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 da, they get what they get, they're very cruel, inhumane people, absolutely callous. Anyways, they don't have a heart, so nothing we say to them could ever penetrate them. If they believe that other human beings deserve to die, other human beings are bad, other human beings deserve to be in jail because they are bad, they deserve to be bombed for any reason. If you think you can be, not because, okay, we're trying to make sure that this person is harming other people physically because he's psychologically ill, we want to put him away so he doesn't harm other people. That is different than hating people. Hatred is absolutely different because it's not about the person, it's not about the object of our hatred, it's the fact that the perceiver has the capacity for that level of vanity. So his feet were absolutely torn up. He was in utter despair. He was crying. This was years, and he almost wanted to die, but most people don't commit suicide, especially back then with much less pressure. Things were much more accepting. People were not judged for being bad people simply because they were born into a family without enough resources and told that the reason why they don't have good medicine, the reason why they don't have good food is because they're bad. It was not like this back then. So it was a little bit less psychologically painful at some level. But eventually, in this condition that he was in, he was not able to get shoes. No one would help him. He was in a very bad place. And years had passed. And a chariot came and found him. And they said, your father has called you back. He is very old and dying, and he wants you to be his successor. In a single split second, this homeless man, this beggar, once a prince, disappeared. The prince was back. And in fact, the beggar was gone. The man was totally different. You could see it in his eyes. They were absolutely blooming, they were light, they were beautiful. He was in shock. The clothes were still that of a beggar, but the man was totally different. And even a crowd gathered, the same crowd that had been rejecting him and shunning him and telling him to get a job and telling him that he is a piece of shit for asking for money from other people who are working, he's not good enough, and that he's a detriment. Then they started showing friendship and they said, wow, you are the son of a prince, I cannot believe it. Well, let me help you out. Of course, this beggar, this prince was not interested. He went up to the chariot, he said, and he told the man, okay, first take me to a beautiful place where I can have a good bath, find some reasonable clothes, some shoes, some ornaments, because I want to go before the king only as a prince, not in this condition. When he came home, he came as a prince, and he had his father. And he didn't know what to say. He met his father. He said, wow, I just want to know, why did you throw me out so many years ago? It hurt so badly. I don't understand what I did. You raised me since I was a little boy. And one day, unexpectedly, in the middle of the night, you threw me out. Why would you do that to me? And his father said, this is what my father did to me. It was not done to harm you, but to give you the experience of the extremes of life, the beggar and the king. And between these two, everybody exists. That day I told you to forget that you were a prince. Now I want you to remember that being a prince or a beggar are just identities given by others. It is not your reality, it is not you, neither a king nor a beggar. These are simply borrowed labels from other people. And the moment you realize that, you are not what the world thinks of you anymore. You are not what you appear to be to anybody else, but you are something deeply hidden inside of yourself that no one has access to except for you. Nobody else can see. Then you become a wise man when you realize your true aloneness. Knowing it, wisdom certainly follows. The father proceeded to say that he was very angry at his father when his father did this to him. And he said, I know you must be very angry at me as well, my son. But forgive me, please. I had to do it to make it clear to you. Do not get identified with being a king. Don't get identified with being a beggar. Because in a split second, these identities can change. And they are nothing but a game. And that which can be changed is certainly not you, my son. You are something eternal. Something unchangeable. Far beyond the identity of what other people perceive you as. People have gone very, very far away from reality. And in poker, this is absolutely the case. Rather than going and trying to understand what their opponent has and why their opponent is doing what they are doing, and hand reading and actively trying to exploit them in every single possible way that they can, the way that training sites used to do it 15 years ago, when they were honest at one point. They are now selling the idea of certainty, which is what the church has been doing, which is what the state has been doing with nationalism. Our country is absolutely good. But what is this goodness? Something can only be good if something else is bad. Black can only be black if there is a white. Something has to exist in opposition to something else. Nothing can exist in and of itself. So you say, I'm American, I'm proud to be American. Well, you must not like other people then. Or you don't understand what the word pride means. You're either very ignorant or you're very arrogant. People have gone very far from reality. And to remind them of their reality hurts them very much. Especially in poker. If we say GTO is not the only way. Because they want to cling to certainty. They want to show you that they know. But there is no possibility of showing anybody anything. Because knowledge in and of itself. What are you going to use? A combination of words? And they're going to make a facial movement and use some vocal inflections. And you are going to believe that now they know? They don't want to see their ignorance. They don't want to be reminded that this entire GTO, I'm going to memorize random shit rather than expand my mind and understand why the game works, understand theory from first principle. They don't want to see it. They've tried to forget so hard, that's why they memorize more and more and more knowledge, because they don't want to see their ignorance. And they've managed to create a certain identity in the world, and when we start to talk about the fact that things are not directly knowable and poker is absolutely infinite, this brain, this ego, this mind feels very uncomfortable. So it's very natural if people do not want to discuss this. In fact, I would make the suggestion that we probably consider just taking it with ourselves, maybe a very close friend who we consider to be very mature, and we should not be offended if we say something that goes against their beliefs and they don't like it. It can be okay to have company and study, but certainly we need very open-minded people. And that's very hard to find. Very hard to find people that are not interested in only advancing their a priori knowledge, only advancing their current beliefs, but actually they want truth. It's very hard. I would not even worry about their behavior, others. They are completely asleep. And we are trying to do something which goes absolutely against their sleep. We are not trying to acquire more knowledge in PioSolver. We are trying to understand the entirety of the game. So naturally, they will feel very disturbed and they will react and they will not be very happy. But fortunately, the proof is in the pudding. So it's absolutely acceptable if people react poorly. In fact, we don't even need to tell them because it doesn't matter. A person will say, please tell me the truth. And then when you tell him the truth, because it goes against his current belief of what he is, he will get angry. Fuck you, why did you say that? And then you say, well, you told me to tell you the truth. No, that's not the truth. Of course. People don't want the truth. They just believe the idea. I want the truth. And then when you tell them, then they want to kill you. because they want the idea that reaffirms their current perception of what the truth is. But of course, we don't have access to the truth, because the truth is not an idea. It's not a conception. It simply is what's in front of us. If we are blind and we don't realize that we're already here, we're already free, then we are still imprisoned in the mind. We're still identified. No problem. There are many methods to be able to free ourselves, but we certainly don't want to go around and trying to make it clear to other people in the poker community that we are friends with, that we are playing against. And not because it will take away our edge, but simply because they will not understand it. It will be a very challenging thing. These people have lost hope. They simply think, I'm going to play whatever until the end. I'm going to make my money. I'm going to worry about my family. But they don't have love for the game. We are not going to lose love for the game until our very last breath, because there's nothing more magnificent than this strategy game. It's not something that you play to retire from. It's something that you play because you love. And sure, you can retire, but your love never leaves you, because poker is not a means to an end. It cannot be. When someone feels offended, the only thing they can feel offended by is something that is truthful about them. Something which they've been hiding from themselves. Of course, they may say, I feel offended when you talk about someone else. This hurts my feelings, whatever. But this is all happening within the perceiver. You can never be offended by a lie. Truth is the greatest defender to the ego. Their very disturbance, their fear that the fact that poker is so infinite will certainly destroy their morale. Certainly destroy their perception and their safety blanket of this illusory security that I know what I'm doing. Now, it won't, probably, because they will never want to look at this. But the point is that this requires us to go within ourselves. It requires us to be willing to not go into the study groups. It requires us to be willing to meditate. It requires us to be willing to question our current schema of poker. So one of the important things as well, because I want to speak to the person who maybe does not have so much money, maybe needs to make a living as well, maybe is in some sort of situation where he is required to make money. That is no problem. Finding consciousness is not so difficult. In fact, if we are going to play, and we are going to play a lot of hands, all that is required is we remove all of our distractions. In fact, it would be better if we reduce tables and tried to be more focused. But we start to consider our poker schema. Very often people think about poker being a means to an end for money. But poker has nothing to do with money. If you're playing poker for money, absolutely good, because I want you to be able to support yourself and your family. I'm very happy for you. It's beautiful. It's very important. And it's a perfect means for exchange, so we don't have to go and hunt ourselves. But it's important to understand that if we actually start to get good at poker, money will never be an issue. If we really go deep into the right problems, this whole rat race completely ends. Money is an absolutely loaded subject because of people's psychology. It is absolutely full of, I want to make 1 extra BB per 100. I don't want to think about the love of the game and give back and play recreational players and have fun. Money is basically just a very simple way of exchanging things. There's nothing wrong with it. But the way that we've been working everything out seems to be absolutely wrong, prioritizing money over love. If you don't have money, you are condemned. Your whole life is a curse. And your whole life you're trying to have money by any sort of means. If you have money, it does not change the basic thing. You want more. There's no need for wanting more. And by the end, you finally have too much money, although it's not enough because it does not fulfill your soul. Because again, money is just an idea, and the meaning of money And the emotions that we feel behind not having money are simply just a function of our beliefs and our conditionings. When you have too much money, then you finally start to feel a little bit guilty. Because the means that you've used to accumulate the money are ugly, inhumane, violent. Not us as poker players necessarily, but for instance, if we're playing low stakes, we're basically taking money from people who may not be conscious enough to be able to stop themselves from gambling. It would be much better to try to be able to take money from high stakes players who actually have the ability to lose the money. Not only the professionals, we're not going to take money from the professionals, not too much, but from the recreational players who have millions of dollars. It's a far more humane way to go. But we've been exploiting and sucking the blood out of people. And not from poker. There's nothing wrong with playing lower stakes in poker. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm trying to make the argument that simply staying at low stakes because we believe that we don't have the capacity to move up is absolutely false. And the reason why this happens is because it's so difficult to expand the mind. It creates a lot of difficulty in the perceiver. Now we've got, even when we end up getting to high stakes, this will not fulfill our soul. We will see many high stakes players who are alcoholics, who are drug addicts, who are in pain. They're not fulfilled. So it's not like just getting to high stakes is the end all be all either. Actually, loving this game and loving ourselves and loving life. But it's not a doing where you're not going to love life. It simply comes from increasing our self-awareness. One of the things that we often hear when some of these poker players as well end up making a lot of money is that they want to give back. They want to give back. But this is also a conditioning. There's nothing wrong with giving back. It's love. It's beautiful, right? But it creates two kinds of people. One who starts donating to charitable institutions to get rid of their own guilt. They're doing good work. They're doing God's work. They're opening hospitals, schools, helping poker players, etc. So they're trying to not go insane because of their guilt, because they've been told that having money and playing poker well and accumulating resources is bad. They've also been told that if you don't have it, you're also bad. All the hospitals, all the schools, colleges, your charitable institutions are the outcomes of guilty people. It would be very nice if these institutions were absolutely free for all people and we taxed everybody. We made sure that everybody had medical. We made sure that everybody had college. Everybody had lower education. We have the resources to do it. I'll give you an example of this guilt as well, though it's not an example from poker. Well, there was a Nobel Prize winner. In fact, the Nobel Prize was founded by this man who actually earned money by the First World War in creating atom bombs. Or it wasn't actually atom bombs. They were very destructive weapons anyways. So the First World War was actually fought using the means supplied by Mr. Nobel. And he earned a fantastic amount of money. And both the parties were getting war material from the same source. And he was the only person who was making the money, because he was the one who was creating the war material on a vast scale. So whoever was killed by him. It doesn't matter if he belonged to this side or to that side. The people that were killed by his bombs. So in this age, when we have all the money we can have, it's still not going to fulfill our deep desire to understand ourselves, to understand poker, to understand our opponents. So all charitable work at some level is essentially a way to alleviate our guilt. There should not be a reason for charitable work in the first place, because everybody should have the means and the resources to do whatsoever they need to do. As far as eating, as far as housing, as far as medical, all of these things should be taken care of. But we live in a very ugly society. When Pontius Pilate ordered the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, The first thing that he did was fucking wash his hands. And it doesn't make any sense. You order the crucifixion of this beautiful man, and how does it make your hands dirty? How long does it take man to understand this? 2,000 years, and he still doesn't understand. Nobody's even mentioned why this is the case. And it was Sigmund Freud who found out that people who were guilty started washing their hands. Sigmund Freud, very intelligent man, very helpful to modern psychologists, and he's given us a lot of insights into the psyche. So if you are good enough to be able to accumulate money in poker, and if you have it, it creates guilt. One way to wash your hands is by helping charitable institutions or other people. And this gets exploited by religions as well. Very, very, very sad stuff, because these religions are not helping you become free. They're exploiting your guilt. In fact, some people have such self-destructive mechanisms, and it depends on the kind of conditioning that one has, that they may not even play enough to be able to save money for the future when they are older, so they can retire, so they can have medical care, so they can have food, so they can have a home, a shelter. Some people only play a few hours a day because it's too difficult. So they only make what they can get right now. Even squirrels are more intelligent. Even squirrels stick nuts in the ground for the future. It's very important. It's very important to understand the mechanisms of the mind. Why do we feel guilty for making too much money? Or why do we feel guilty for not making enough money? This is not... Now, one may also believe that these things don't have anything to do with poker, but that is absolutely false. There's not a single topic in the world that does not have something to do with poker, because poker is the greatest analogy for life. And if you don't understand that, you do not understand life, and you do not understand poker. But we poker players certainly do understand. It is hard to make analogies about life and poker to people that do not play poker, but certainly we can understand. It's important to understand that this idea that when we get to high stakes or when we are at mid stakes, again, it doesn't matter where we go. Whatever hand we are playing right now, absolutely beautiful. That is the magnificence. But it's also very important to understand that this society is very sick, because it creates a deep psychological sickness in the mind. It makes people feel guilty. And when people reach their goal, I have money, I'm a high stakes poker player, we see that these people sometimes are drug addicts. We see that these people are very degenerate. They're not happy. They're looking for things outside of themselves to make them happy. And only a fool can do such a thing. It doesn't mean poker is not something outside of us, by the way. Poker is simply inside of us. Poker is our knowledge. Poker is our understanding. So even though we've gone and we've done everything that the educational system and the society has told us by going and making our money, we still are at a dead end. And we can see it. We don't have to do it ourselves. We can watch. We can look at some of the greatest poker players in the world, and we can see their pain. Not directly, but we can watch their behavior, and we can imagine, why would someone do that? Why does that happen? So we can simply look for ourselves and take a look. The proof is in the pudding. These people are not all happy at high stakes. It's very important to understand that expanding our minds for poker is absolutely fundamental. But not even everybody at high stakes has done so. And it's important to understand that all the leaves are on the same tree. And that enlightenment, self-realization is only possible when they all come together. And only the perceiver, only the single individual can fulfill his being and understanding that he is deeply alone in this existence. Not lonely, but alone. In the sense that all of his knowledge is his. It is not possible to bridge the gap with another. These things are absolutely correct. They do seem somewhat contradictory. And there may be some confusion. On one hand, I'm saying that when you're one, when we are not fragmented, then we come to the realization. But to be one means that we disappear. And we are no more. And we are simply playing poker. There's no more us. There's simply poker. On the other hand, I'm also saying be yourself and be very authentic with your love with poker. And sit and meditate and think about yourself. Think about meditation. And you will see your original face. But only then can you experience the realization. I can see the dilemma, though, at some level, because this does seem very contradictory on the surface. These things are both right, and that is significant to remember. And if we can feel that they both are right, even if our mind disagrees, if we have the feeling deep down that both these things are correct, that means that we are far beyond the ordinary mind, because the ordinary mind believes that if something is the case, then something else must not be the case, or something else must be the case. In the sense that how can you say that you are going to disappear and there's only poker, but you're saying to focus on yourself and meditate and sit. But don't worry about the mind stories. Understand that feeling. If you know that it's right, it means you're very in touch with yourself. Much more than the ordinary men. And of course we must be as poker players because we have to make a living. We have to beat other people. We are not given free money. We have to fight for it. The same as lions have to fight for their food. In the sense that if we are not intelligent, then we will not eat. We are not given handouts. Our money comes from our brain power and from our honesty with ourselves. Mind will pick one or the other, but the heart understands both. The heart has no logic, but it is very sensitive, very perceptive. It can see that they can not only be together, but in fact they are not two. It's just one phenomenon seen from two different perspectives, in fact. The same we say about a coin. It is a coin, but heads or tails? Heads is an independent thing from tails. North is an independent thing from south. There's so much more than the two. And that's why I say both. And if there's a question of choosing between the mind and the heart is always right. Always. Because the mind is simply a creation of the past, of the society, of the teachings that we've been taught. We've been educated. We've been educated to care about things that do not matter. And it's been given to us by our society, not by this existence. Our heart is given by the existence. And it is absolutely unpolluted and pure. And there's no way to pollute our essence. Hence it has tremendous sensitivity, and it can see things from many different angles. Look at the viewpoint of the heart, and the contradiction starts melting away, even if logically, how is that the case? It's a contradiction. But actually, the mind can only see one perspective, and this is why when we start to find cosmic consciousness, we are able to understand all the opponents. We are able to understand all the strategies. Because we have created the entire thing. We must be one with the universe, but in order to have that happen, we have to be willing to sit with ourselves. We have to be willing to think for ourselves and not borrow any prescribed strategies. But in fact, we have to be the strategist. We have to become the Napoleon. Not to kill, but to make love. Because poker is simply love. There's nothing more beautiful. We are poker. But the personality and the particular strategies that we are identified with create a sort of deception and makes us feel like we have to defend these ideas. You cannot assume yourself to be separate from poker. Poker gives us absolute freedom. Even against itself. You can think to yourself as a separate entity, an ego. I am just playing poker and it is a means to an end to get something so I can buy this and fuck these people, get lucky and da 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 da. These people are not playing poker. They've never seen a deck of cards in their life. They simply see a deck and then their brain says money. They don't actually see the deck. And it's simply a barrier that is holding them back from melting their heart into the vastness of poker that has no closed doors. It opens all the doors. Sometimes do you feel a certain door opens, but only for a fragment of a moment? Your personality cannot afford more. Your identity with a particular style of play, a particular trick that you are playing against a player pool, is simply a fragment of what you are, but your knowledge is infinite. Those moments we call beauty, we call them ecstasy, but it is our natural state. Looking at the sunset, making an amazing call, not because it's GTO, but because we simply saw the timing and we were like, I don't think this guy has something deep down, even though logically I'm supposed to fold this hand, whatever percent, I think I need to call. And we make a call and we're right and we say, wow, holy shit, this is our natural state. We are that. That is the moment when we see the beauty. We say, this is beautiful. We are no longer feeling it. We have come back to our separate case, our separate identity, our encased, closed, encapsulated little ego. This is the way I play poker. This is what I do. If anybody argues, I'm going to say they're wrong. Even though I'm playing 25 and I'll disagree with a high stakes player. When I see a video, I'll critique him even though I don't have a clue. Nonsense. Perhaps to know too much actually makes it difficult to speak. And the mind knows so little. Is it possible for it to say anything about poker? Language is enough for it, but not enough for poker. Certainly enough for someone who has not expanded their mind. That's why training sites cannot work. Because we ourselves are our only coach. There's no one else that can coach us. We ourselves are the coach. If we believe that we are not good enough, it's not true. If we believe that we don't have the capacity to do it, but someone else does, it's not true. It's absolutely false. We do have to take responsibility. Not for anything else, not for anybody else, but for our own consciousness. And one might say is that feeding our ego, trying to spend time with ourselves, give ourselves attention, meditate, be still, be silent. Is that not feeding our ego? Not helping others, not being with others? But this is simply an intellectual idea, something that arises. It is not contradictory. Consciousness is the seed that we have to water. We have to build the fence. We have to get the right manure. This is our responsibility. It is not to make the realization and become something great. It is simply to do the footwork. And the footwork is actually meditating. Another intellectual question, which is similar, would be, when we bring light into a room, what are we going to do with the darkness? Where are we going to throw it? Intellectually, it's absolutely perfectly right, completely logical. There is darkness in a room, and you say bringing the light into the room. The question arises, well, where is the darkness going to be pushed? Where is it going to be thrown? Where is it going to go? But it is not existential. Try to bring the light in and there will be no question about darkness. There will be no darkness. Responsibility is awareness, alertness, consciousness. And ego is simply unconsciousness. They cannot coexist. As you grow more consciousness, you grow more toward light. And anything belonging to the world of memorization tactics for studying, and this world of darkness completely disappears because we become one in the moment And we think very deeply about everything. We are not just autopiloting. Ego is nothing but darkness. There's only one thing really to remember. Try to ask questions that are existential. Think about things that are real. Existential. Intellectual questions may look logical, but they are absolutely absurd. Take responsibility for your consciousness. We must do that because nobody else will. They are all sleeping. And most people are not poker players. Most people are not intelligent. Most people simply are parrots. Poker players cannot afford that. Remaining responsible, we will certainly create light that automatically dispels any darkness. So, I love you all so much. So much, my friends. My beautiful friends. And I will speak with you all very soon. Mwah.